Each year, it seems that Rosh Hashanah is here before I know it. There's a popular book about the Jewish high holidays entitled, "This is Real, and You Are Completely Unprepared." It's by Rabbi Alan Liu, and the title strikes me as true every year. Before and during the days of awe, as is customary, I reflect on the past year and think about where I have fallen short. I then make plans on how to do better in the new year. I admit that it is a bit disturbing to realize year after year that I have fallen short in the same or similar ways as in previous years. For example, there were several years in a row when I fell short by overeating chocolate. I actually don't even remember how I got out of that habit, but now I have new things with which to contend. Teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah are the key spiritual practices in which Jews engage during the days of awe. Teshuvah concerns repairing our relationships and may be the most well-known practice of this season. Tefillah is heart-centered practice, including singing, prayer, and meditation, some of which occurs during worship services. Tzedakah refers to compassionate action for justice. The practice of deep listening informs all three practices. During the month of Elul, the last month in the Jewish calendar preceding Rosh Hashanah, it is customary to blow the shofar, a ram's horn, each day. The shofar is also blown during the Rosh Hashanah morning services and at the end of Yom Kippur. Marcia Falk, in her book, The Days Between, reinterpreted the liturgical passages preceding the sounding of the shofar during the Rosh Hashanah morning service. She follows the traditional structure of placing a brief biblical text followed by a reflection. I will read the first section of her interpretation, Shafarot Calls. In this section, she strays from the form for the third reflection and uses her own imagery prior to her reflection. Shafarot Calls, hearing and attending. Sound the shofar on the new moon, on our holiday, when the moon is still hidden. Psalm 81, verse 4. The shofar calls, the crescent rises. The new year is upon us. O inhabitants of the world, you who dwell upon the earth, when the flag is raised on the mountain, look. When the shofar is sounded, listen. Isaiah 18, verse 3. The shofar quiets us, wakening us to the silence within. In the clearing where the mind flowers and the world sprouts up at every side, listen for the sound in the bushes, behind the grass. The shofar takes us into the self that is hidden from the self, then returns us to the world. In the silence, we hear the voice of the other. We hear what has gone unheard. First, the shofar causes us to listen to ourselves. As Marcia Falk writes, the shofar quiets us, wakening us to the silence within. What is our silence within? Those of us who have meditated know that our mind is probably never silent, and we heard Sheila talk about this in her reflection. What is it like to listen to the silence in our minds? How do we listen to the silence? In the silence, can we hear that still, small voice? A few lines later, Falk writes, "The shofar takes us into the self that is hidden from the self." When we are silent and listening to ourselves, we might find what is really true for us. In Elul, again, the month leading up to Rosh Hashanah, observant Jews contemplate the past year in order to discover where we have fallen short with ourselves, with our community, within our ecology, and if we are theists, with the divine or God. Blowing the shofar and then sitting in meditation can help us quiet the mind and hear our inner truth about where we might need to make repairs with ourselves and with the broader community. Like meditation, it is a practice, and doing it every day could make it easier to hear that still small voice. Repairing and strengthening our bonds with our community comprises the second focus of the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. As Falk writes, "In the silence, we hear the voice of the other. We hear what has gone unheard." It is time to engage in deep listening with our relations. Rather than listening deeply for our still small voice, we are quieting our minds in order to truly hear the needs of others. We are listening to hear and not listening so that we can come up with a response that makes us feel better or a response that can excuse any actions that might have hurt someone. We listen to understand and we listen to empathize. Only then can we begin to repair, if repair is needed. It is traditional to forgive oneself and to apologize to and ask forgiveness from the people we have wronged prior to Rosh Hashanah and definitely before Yom Kippur. Like the song goes, we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. We want to do this work mindfully rather than rotely. Some people have a practice of sending an email to everyone they know, offering a blanket apology and asking forgiveness for any unknown transgressions over the past year. That practice requires no listening and doesn't involve a true apology because one is not apologizing for anything specific. Though I believe that people who prepare for Rosh Hashanah by sending these emails have sincere intent and believe that they are doing the right thing by sending a blanket apology and asking for forgiveness, to me, it seems more like a mindless practice. It is following the directive in name only. When asking for forgiveness, Judaism requires that the request be sincere. How can the request be sincere when one doesn't even know what harm one has caused? It is a lot more difficult to sit with someone's pain and find out what they need. It is also more difficult to sit with the knowledge that one has caused pain. Marcia Falk's third section of Shafarot, Calling, concerns our ecology. This is the only stanza in which she uses her own poetry rather than a biblical verse. In the clearing, when the mind flowers and the world sprouts up at every side, listen for the sound in the bushes, behind the grass. The shofar takes us into the self that is hidden from the self, then returns us to the world. In the silence, we hear the voice of the other. We hear what has gone unheard. Falk uses the language of nature to stimulate our imagination to listen. She uses the word clearing and then uses the language of nature to describe what our mind is doing. In the clearing, our mind flowers. While our mind is flowering, the world sprouts up at every side. She then directs us to listen. What are we listening for? We are listening for the sound of the bushes behind the grass. We can interpret this call as the call to listen to our wider community, our ecology, our world, and our universe. What do the bushes tell us? What does the grass tell us? What do our forests, our streams, and our bay tell us? What do we need to do to repair our ecology? Yom Kippur is known as the happiest day of the Jewish calendar, partly because if we have done our work, we have done as much as possible to repair our relationships. We begin again in love. Yom Kippur is also a type of practice for death. Food and drink are not consumed. People wear all white, like a burial shroud, and activity is limited. We hope that when it is time for us to die, our matters will be settled, and we are not dying with what we call in hospice, unfinished business. Like in Unitarian Universalism, there is no set belief around what happens after death. And like Unitarian Universalism, what is important is living one's life here on earth in an ethical manner and doing our part to bring about justice. For some Jews, this means following the 613 mitzvot, or joyful obligations, which are set forth in the Torah. Other Jews carry out joyful obligations in other ways, which might not be in strict adherence to the mitzvot in the Torah. Some of these activities might include attending demonstrations, speaking at city council meetings, walking for mental health, and working in other ways in order to change unjust systems. Right now, during the current wars in Israel, Palestine, and Lebanon, many Jews around the world are in distress over what is being done by the Israeli government, sometimes not only in the name of Israel, but also in the name of all Jews. Jews around the world are divided about these wars. There is little debate that the Hamas massacres on October 7, 2023 were an atrocity and were carried out with genocidal intent. However, many Jews also believe that Israel's disproportionate response was so far the deaths of over 41,000 people, half of whom are women and children, not only violates Jewish law and ethics, but is genocidal. For many Jews, opposing the Israeli government's aggression aligns with their concept of tikkun olam, which can be translated as repairing the world or bringing about justice here on earth. The concept of tikkun olam is one that unites Jews, though we are divided about how to practice it. My synagogue is one of the synagogues in the country and around the world demanding an immediate ceasefire. We have also changed some of the liturgy to include Hagar when naming our ancestors. We remember that Isaac and Ishmael were brothers from the same family, and when we have conflicts in our family, we don't kick people out of the family. Jews and Palestinians have ancestors in common. The division between Jews and the Arabs is a false binary, and like all binaries, only serves systems of oppression. Before the state of Israel came into being, Jews whose families had always lived in the land now called Israel were called Palestinian Jews. They were also called Arab Jews. Many Palestinian Christians have Jewish ancestors, as the first Christ followers in Palestine were Jewish. Those of us who converted to Judaism and might not have any Canaanite ancestry can still claim Abraham and Sarah as our spiritual ancestors, in the same way that Abraham is a spiritual ancestor to Muslims and Christians without Arab ancestry. Jews from Arab countries all have Arab ancestry. We are from the same family. For some of us during this time of listening to our still small voice, we are discerning how we have fallen short in our work of Tikkun Olam. What more can we do to oppose the war in Gaza? What more can we do to help the candidates we support get elected? How can we change systems in order to house the unhoused and to clothe the naked? How have we harmed our ecology over the past year, and what changes can we make to reduce our harm? What can we do to help change systems so that repairing our ecology is easier than harming it? These are all questions that we can begin to answer by listening to our still small voice and the voice of others. May we continue to strengthen our ability to listen and hear others in our families, our communities, our ecology, and our world. Amen, Amin, and blessed be.